Hi, it's Khaliah here, real estate investor coach in Washington, D.C. And today we're going to be discussing how foreclosure auctions work. I'm just going to give a moment for some others to jump on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm back. Let's go ahead and get started. So, first, let me talk about what is a foreclosure. So, basically, when you go to buy a house and you take out a loan, you have a promise to repay. And you actually sign a deed of trust. And that deed of trust basically spells out the terms of the repayment between the borrower and the lender. And so what happens with a foreclosure is that basically the person who borrowed the money stops making their payments. And so in that situation, the bank wants to recover their losses. So basically what they'll do is they'll actually hold a foreclosure auction in order to get their house back. And so basically when the homeowner stops paying, it's really called a forfeiture. And I want to go over, there's two different types of foreclosures. And actually, I'm going to spell them out for you. One is called the foreclosure by power of sale. And the other one is called the judicial foreclosure. And so I'm going to go over both of them because actually a foreclosure by judicial sale is basically overseen by the courts. And so with that, the court actually oversees the auction to make sure that things are handled properly. And so let's say, for instance, there's auction. Normally these auctions are held on the courthouse steps, and they'll auction the property off. And so what happens is that when someone comes and they bid for the property, the amount that is paid to purchase that property or in that auction actually goes off to pay the interest in the home, and then any other fees. And then what happens is if there's any overages, that overages goes back to the borrower. So in a judicial sale, like where I am, for instance, if somebody wanted to go to actually foreclose in Washington, D.C., they would have to file a hearing with the courts. And even in D.C., for instance, you may want to check your state laws where you are, because in D.C., the banks have to give you a time to be able to mediate. So they have to give you an opportunity to say, okay, well, is there going to be a foreclosure, or do you want to try to do a modification, or are you trying to do a short sale? So the bank has to give you time to be able to, and everything's overseen by the courts, mind you. So everything is overseen by a court hearing, but you're going down there, you're discussing, what your income is and all those types of things to be able to come to an agreement. Now, if you're not able to hold up to the terms of whatever the agreement is, let's say, for instance, you can't do a short sale. I mean, you don't want to do a short sale, or you don't comply with the short sale, or you don't agree to the payments and make the payments. Let's say, for instance, you do a modification and you don't stick to that, or you just don't show up and the mediation is over, then what happens is the courts will actually start the foreclosure proceedings. And so with that, like I told you, once you go down there, they're auctioning on the courthouse steps. Once the house is actually sold at the auction, then any of those funds go towards like paying the interest rates and things like that. And if there's any overages, that amount will go back to the borrower. So that's the judicial sale. The second one is actually the foreclosure by power of sale. So for instance, in Maryland, it's by power of sale. And so those can be handled by like an auctioneer. And basically the courts are not overseeing the foreclosure of that home. So you'll see people wherever they want to hold it. Some even auctioneers will hold it in their office or what have you, and they'll have like different terms that are required for the bidding. So let's say it's like 10% you have to come if you're going to actually bid on a property, and you can bid, and basically the house is just sold at auction. They don't have to go through the courts. They can just do automatic. They don't have to go through the courts per se to be able to foreclose. And so with these, the terms are set by the auctioneer. So if you want to go and you want to bid on a property, you'll need to contact the auctioneer to find out what the terms are in order for you to bid on that. But like I said, normally there's a deposit. Then the remaining balance of actually bidding on that home is actually due 30 days, within 30 days after the auction. And so there's a couple tips that I want to give you if you're looking to actually bid on foreclosure homes. And one thing I would say is that you definitely want to make sure you do your due diligence, because in these situations when you're bidding on these homes, you don't know what they look like on the inside. So you have to kind of almost expect worst case scenario, because you don't know what you're getting. So the house you drive by, the house may look okay on the outside, but who's to say what the house looks like on the inside? So if you're looking to rehab, basically you just almost want to expect the worst. So then that way you're not stuck in a situation where this house needs all this repair and you've paid too much for it at the auction. Because just because you buy it at the auction does not necessarily mean that you're going to get a good deal. You have to do your due diligence. And sometimes these auctions can be competitive because there can be a lot of people who you're out there bidding against. I do know, for instance, like certain investors, and all they do is focus on buying foreclosure. So every day they're at the foreclosure auction bidding on properties. So for some people, for some investors, this is their strategy. So you definitely want to do your due diligence as far as finding out, okay, what's the maximum amount that you can pay for the home, given that you have not seen the inside. And another strategy would be, when I first got started in real estate investing, I didn't actually start with foreclosures. I started with pre-foreclosures. And so what I did was, basically when the mortgage companies have filed like a notice of default or filed a case with the courts, a foreclosure, I would actually deal with the homeowners before they actually got to the auction. And I like going about it this way because in those scenarios, I was actually able to see the house in order to know exactly what I was dealing with versus going to an auction and not knowing what the house looks like on the inside. So if you have any other questions, I know this was kind of just like a short summary of how the foreclosure auctions work. If you have any other questions for me, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Bye-bye. Assalamu alaikum. And bye-bye for now.